Yeah, so I'll start with a brief intro, then I'm going to toss it over to you. So, for those of you that can't read the name right above my head, I'm Weston Rice. I've been with SVB, so Silicon Valley Bank, for about 12 years now. Started in Texas, and then 2 years ago, made the reverse commute out to California. And Sean, what I bet you didn't know was you were the first client that I brought on since when I moved out to SVB in California. And I love what we do. We get to work with entrepreneurs. I'm not ever going to be the guy that comes up with the idea, but to be working alongside people like you, that are kind of driving what I think is the future of kind of our country and innovation, is truly inspiring. So, I'm not going to give a pitch on SVB. If you know, it's great. If you don't, that's fine too. But Sean, I may pass it over. Let's do it. Let's do a kind of a bit of a personal intro, and then maybe kind of dive into the launch of Ascend, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to plug SVB because I've been a very, very long time customer. So I'll do that for you. It's easier that
Perfect.
way. Sean Knapp, uh, software engineer turned founder of two companies now. Um, Started my career back in '04 inside of Google, but quickly about 3 years later, ended up starting a company. Built that up to have a pretty globally distributed team, about 500 folks, and I think something like 8 or 9 countries. Um, I would say not remote by the nature of this conference per se, because they were definitely in a variety of different hubs. But after that company was acquired back in 2014, got the itch to start to do something again. So went and founded Ascend in 2015, really with the goal of productizing, automating a lot of the pains that our team back at Uyala, the last company I founded, were feeling. And so have spent the last 5 years building out the team and the technology and really bringing that technology to market. And have been working with SVB. I think the fun story was, obviously we meet lots of people. Well, back in the day when like we interact with humans in person, you meet lots of people here and there. And when I first connected with Weston, we actually really aligned on this philosophy that uh, partnerships do run fairly deep, and you need to really build rapport and trust with folks. And my last company had used SVB our entire life cycle, as well, all the way through 6 rounds of funding and various other financing, all the way through acquisition. And so when we started to talk about how deeply Weston was really trying to build those partnerships and relationships inside of SVB, I was like, I'm going to like this guy. And he has good taste in wine too, so that helps.
I love that. Yeah, we our wine division is quite a perk, and I do appreciate the fact that when I saw Sean was going to be one of the speakers here, I was like, the one client out there that does like me, I should be part of this event. So Sean, and by the way, for those of you that are out there, as you can tell, Sean and I very much enjoy engaging with people. So please don't hesitate to jump in at any point with questions, comments. If there's anything that sparks your interest, we'd love for this to be less of two talking heads and more interactive, if that fits what you're trying to accomplish. So, with that, maybe tell us a little bit about. I'd love to hear some about the product, but also just 2020 in general, headwinds, tailwinds, or just neutral in terms of how this kind of macro world has impacted what you're doing over there.
Yeah. And so we'd
And this is
love
more
to,
from a product perspective, and we'll dive into
yeah,
culture. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm going to try and not swear in this, but if remote working has taught me anything, people who use virtual backgrounds and don't have headphones in, I can't tell that your children are running around the room. Uh, so I'll try my best to avoid those. But if you hear me start to talk about 2020, the odds of profanity like go up significantly. So we'll roll with it. Um, I think so what our product does, right, is, in short, we have invested in some really powerful technology that removes the lion's share of pain that it takes to build really advanced data systems. In short, we productize most of the muck for data engineering. So if you have a really smart data science, machine learning team, data analysts, almost all of them are usually blocked by a lot of the sort of wrangling of the data technology. We productize a ton of it. Using our system takes 95% less code, teams build 5 to 10 times faster, and you can use far more people than ever before. So and that's not designed to be a pitch for Ascend, but it is designed to be a backdrop that we launched our company out of stealth in, what was it, July 17th of last year. And you're like, we're this engineering technology. We sell to hardcore engineers. We got to earn a ton of geek cred. We need to do it. And we're not an open source technology. So we got to go like hit all the big cloud conferences. We go to Amazon's reInvent. I just had a baller time. Like you get there with your big 49-inch curved cinema display, show your product live, and like geek factor through the roof. And everybody's like, this is so cool. Right. And so crushed it at reInvent, and going into 2020, y'all are probably going to see where this is going. We're like, we know our strategy. It's going to be events, in-person events, big monitor, like hallways and conference centers, and we're just going to kill it. And then February and March hit, and you're like, F me sideways. So going into 2020, coming off of a really awesome stealth launch, and then a lot of really great momentum, we were super, super gung-ho. And then building product and going into once COVID hit, we just had to blow everything up. We're like, well, we have a really big unused event budget, so that's cool. Where can we go pour all that money and effort into? Because we got to figure something out, right? And for, I assume, many of the audience here, you don't really have like let's just like time shift everything back by 6 months. No big deal. Like it'll totally be cool, right? So we ended up going super hard towards digital. Like had to up our content game on our website. Had to really start harvesting our marketing database. Started rolling into a ton of podcasts. Lo and behold, podcasts, for example, actually drive more leads than anything else for us. Go figure. Yeah, I was super miffed by that, but it's cool. And then honestly, when it came to product development, we had to shift a lot of our product development to make it easier for people to try and buy. We shifted a lot of our pricing so that you didn't have to do big enterprise commits. We shifted our engagement model because you weren't going to have a salesperson literally sitting there in your lobby trying to sell your product. And so we had to make a lot of very quick changes to really adapt, especially as a small company that was just starting to get takeoff velocity.
Yeah. So maybe dive a little bit into that. So you mentioned, so I went and saw you at the AWS reInvent, loved what you were doing. A lot of energy there. And you could tell that people, being many of these engineers, are very engaged. How does this sales motion change? Because I would imagine those engineers are not the ones cutting the checks. So how do you then pivot this to say, all right, we're going through podcasts, we're taking a unique approach to getting in front of engineers, but ultimately the person cutting the check, we're not going to be able to sit down in person with. So how did you change that, or is this still a work in motion?
Yeah, good question. So there's no silver bullet. Maybe there is, but like, we just like shot off every round in the gun. So I couldn't tell you which one actually is the perfect one. But I can tell you what we did, right? So we did we used to be hey, you have to have a 6-figure annual commit, big kind of contract, because you got to go pay for the salesperson to fly across the country and sit in your lobby. That stuff's not cheap. And so we used to have much more of that model. We flipped to you can literally pay as you go. You don't have to sign a big contract. We actually revised our contract is the other big piece, where we made it much more of a click through, much easier to buy. We also integrated into all 3 of the cloud marketplaces, which is super important because they have their own click through agreements, and oftentimes, especially bigger enterprises, already have their enterprise commits with AWS or Azure or Google. And if you let them buy through that, their purchase of your product through the cloud marketplace counts against that commit. So they already have some reserved budget for it. And then we introduced, for folks who do want to make bigger commits, and volume discounts and so on. So we tried much harder for a get in, just start using the product, and then we'll give you the ability to expand, but make it really, really easy to go buy.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep, sorry, we can hear you now.
I took the mic on and off, and you pop back. Okay, so So let's pivot just a bit, but you've got a sales team, you've got a marketing team, you have people that are trying to figure out what is the right motion in this ever evolving year we're in. And in doing that, and I'm going to take a step back. One of my favorite things was visiting your office. You had fun people, a lot of energy. You had very happy and also quiet dogs, or maybe at least I saw one dog there. But so everyone goes remote, right? This is not unique to your business, but everyone goes remote. How is it that you find a way to bring together people in this new motion? As you mentioned, there's no silver bullet. You're figuring out what this is going to look like. You're kind of testing different paths forward. How do you find alignment between all these groups, these marketing, engineering, sales, you name it, to find this cohesive strategy? Or are you just saying, look, we're gonna you do this, and then you're kind of coordinating, or the phrase we use way too often at SVB, quarterbacking something. But how are you finding a way, and maybe looking back, is there something you would have changed to say, this is how I should have aligned our folks internally to more efficiently probe these different kind of sales motions?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I will say that I definitely historically have been more in a work in office, and if you plotted me in the spectrum, I'm further on the end of the spectrum of work from office,
Got
from
it.
home. So this has been a very educational year for me as well. But the setup we had in our office was truly remarkable. We'd actually even shaped a lot of our culture around it, right? I mean, like, you literally have we have a big office in Palo Alto, so like we literally have a dog run. Like, according to, well, the landlord believes that it's actually a playpen for kids, so we throw Legos in there. But technically, it's the dog run, and like people bring their dogs, and they hang out. Like, we literally have a drop down 120-inch projector screen. The whole team like sits on couches and watches as we do big team presentations, right? All the way out to the really nice nuances of, on your very first day, you don't just drop into the office. The first thing you do is your team takes you out to breakfast and you break bread with your team before you talk anything about work, right? And so those things we leaned on really hard because they were there and they were powerful, right? And so that makes it really hard when you're remote. And I mean, like, yeah, we can kind of break bread. I can pour myself a bowl of cereal, and you can pour yourself a bowl of cereal, and we can, like, Zoom call
Yeah.
together on your first day. But it just isn't the same thing, right? It's like having 12 people from your team all around the table chatting about their weekend and just asking you personal questions and learning who you are as a human, right?
Yeah.
So we've done a bunch of stuff. One is we have invested really heavily in really heavily in what we call the water cooler pieces, right? So we fortunately have a lot of what I would call culture mobilizers and culture reinforcers inside the company, who you always have these that, like, they're lightning rods in a great way, right? Where they just, like, they share their home projects, whether it's literally making a shed or building a fancy new water cooled desk for your 32 core computer. Like the whole spectrum, right? And when you get a critical mass of people who have that, who are highly inclusive, they draw other people in, right?
Mm-hmm.
We usually try and do, for like a lot of our team meetings, like always try and pull in personal, like I know pretty much everybody personally at this point, outside of folks we just haven't been able to connect with if they're new. But you actually try and learn more about them personally and ask them about that, and ask them about it in front of the group if they're comfortable, because it helps you build that connectivity. And then I would say the biggest thing that's really important for us from a business operations perspective is context matters so much. The first 3 months post quarantine,
Yep.
you just got to leverage the fact that you had residual water cooler context and teams could still execute pretty efficiently.
Yep.
It becomes much harder as that residual effect wanes, right? We're in a benefit where we don't have a lot of middle management, right? Context always gets watered down when you go through layers of communication. So we don't have a lot of middle management inside the company. And we actually structure things where we have company-wide stand-ups every day at 10 a.m. huge debate as to whether or not 10 a.m. is too early or not with a very engineering centric culture.
Sure.
But like we do it every single day, and it's funny because we'll even have a couple of different stand-ups that you sort of wean off people as you go. But what I found is everybody stays for pretty much the entire thing because they're just really curious about what everybody else is doing.
Do you find that people are engaged in that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting thing is the team that we sit on is our enterprise software team, which is Northern California, so Bay Area, exclusively focused on B2B tech. So between Series A and 100 million-ish in revenue. And we are trying to find this balance of what is the right number of internal meetings, because when we were in the office, like you mentioned, there's just these fortuitous discussions about talking about what we're seeing in deals and companies and industry and competition, and you can pivot your chair around. And you know, unfortunately, we don't have a dog run in the office, but you just have these awesome opportunities to engage with people that may not be in your direct team.
Yeah.
And we are trying to figure out what is that happy median of saying, like, go and execute and do your job, while also balancing, like, how many internal meetings and with whom does it make sense to engage with in those meetings before you're just overkilling and not letting people execute. And then, you know, factor in hiring post-COVID, it's a whole different beast.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And what we found is, I think we're really fortunate because we actually put in a few like sort of cultural norms really early on that help us.
Yep.
In a COVID and virtual world. We actually, like one of the things everybody gets when they start is notebooks. And we do this because we actually have a very, very strong culture around not multitasking. So in person, when you went into most meetings, laptops were closed and people would take notes written. And we have this really strong norm that says, if you feel that you need to multitask, you probably have something more important to do than the meeting you're in. And it's really okay to leave. In fact, it's expected to leave. And it's okay to say, I have other things to go do. And by embracing that norm, what we then found is that transitioned great into a virtual world where everybody in all of our calls has their screens on, many with virtual backgrounds, many without. But you can see everybody in there. You can see everybody engaged. And as a result, when you're talking, you see people nodding, right? Like you see people smiling. You see that human interaction that's really hard if it's just a bunch of icons. And that's actually what pulls people in and compels them to share more. And so when you get into these like daily stand-ups where we're just doing readouts for how the whole company and the team is doing, what we find is that level of engagement, it compels people to share more and engage more with each other. And you get into this virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
Whereas if we didn't have that at the start, I'm not sure we could create it now. Well, I'm pretty sure somebody could. I'm not sure we would know how per se.
So what, maybe just from the culture perspective, and this also goes just to the business side of things as well, but is there anything, and Joe mentioned this in the comments, I'm gonna take one sidetrack. I do not have a virtual background. I'm in Yosemite. So if anyone can see the bees flying around me, I'm not in my house with a virtual background with bees flying around. Yeah, this is actual Yosemite. And I sent Sean a picture of me climbing El Cap yesterday. I got about 4.5 inches off the ground, and by definition, part of it. But the question I want to ask you, Sean, is: are there things you feel like you're still struggling with, as you're thinking about as a leader of an organization, and you're saying, here are things that I still am, and you may not find the answer to, and still maybe that's connectivity. And I'm going to give you one thing I'm trying, and we'll see if this works. You mentioned earlier, so SVB does have a wine division. I've encouraged folks on our team, we're going to ship wine to them, and they can try to introduce it to our team and tell them about, like, this is what I liked, or this is unique. And that's something that when we engage in, and so many of our clients on the wine team have been affected by affected by COVID, not infected, hopefully, by COVID, and then fires. And if we can support them by sending wine to our clients and those in the industry, we want to do that. But it's a lot more fun if I can say, Sean, let me tell you about Davis Estates. Let me tell you about this place up in the valley. And if you're up there, let's go visit it. But the wine thing is such an easy draw for us because it's part of what we do. But I'm so curious from your perspective as someone that is building a rapidly growing and massively successful, especially in Q3. Congrats on this. But a massively and rapidly growing tech company, what are the things that you look at saying, these are the things that keep me up at night? These are the things that I still am trying to figure out as we are building and retaining culture, or if it's on the business side saying there's this bottleneck or this hiccup in the sales motion or this product development side that I just can't figure out today?
Yeah, this is a good question. Well, right now we're trying to figure out how we go find and hire more solution architects yesterday. Because we're frantically trying to find folks, and fast. But I think there's a couple. As we start to introduce some more layers of management, like that's the thing that keeps me up is, how do we make sure we have incredibly efficient conduits of information and context? Because I'm a big believer, you hire really smart people who are really motivated with really strong alignment of their goals and company best interests. And you just pump context into that machine, right? And they will do great work. So the context part definitely keeps me up. I think the other thing that we're spending a lot of time right now on is go-to-market and sales, enterprise sales, where you end up actually doing a lot of enterprise sales through relationships, and you build them rapidly. And so this keeps me up, but I think we're really starting to actually unlock this piece. Is we found a really powerful go-to-market motion too that we're spending a lot of time on right now, which is through boutique SIs. They have consulting advisory relationships with a lot of enterprises all over the globe. And we've actually started to use them and create this whole network of SIs who are just bringing us into a ton of deals.
Okay.
And it's really cool. And this is why we're surging so hard on our solution architects is we actually have an inverted ratio of SA to AE, a solution architect to a sales account exec. Because we're getting so much pull in from the ecosystem we've been building around Ascend. And so unpacking that, which is a new enterprise partner go-to-market motion for us, it's a hard challenge to figure out. And how do we go train those partners who are not only not Ascend employees, but actually even further removed in countries, oftentimes like New Zealand or Georgia. Like that's a really important one for us.
And I don't know if you can hear if we have fans of 90s R&B. A car just pulled up next to me, and I'm a big fan. But this is what we're working with today. So maybe as the world gets back to normal, when we're engaging in this ability to get back to seeing folks in person, do you envision this kind of complete retrenching and in person, or do you think things have gone to, like, we have now transitioned into this kind of new normal? And how do you envision your team taking upon this? Are you going to encourage people to say, get out there, get in person, or do you say, look, this is probably going to be the way of the future, and let's double down and invest in this approach?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we've been asking this of our team a bunch too, as to what their sort of mode is. And I think a lot of it depends too on the level of experience and seniority of folks. Like oftentimes younger junior people really want an office to help learn the ropes, right? And for social circle, I remember when I started my career, I was like, oh my gosh, people like friends at work, this is great.
Absolutely.
And I think so. We'll end up running a hybrid model. I think this is going to be the biggest challenge. Will be, how do you, right now working remote, I think it's easier for most companies. One, because many people don't have as many distractions. People with kids have distractions at home, but a lot of, I'd say younger single folks generally don't. And so you're shorter on distractions, but even more importantly, everybody's remote.
Yep.
Right. And so everybody's a face on a screen. The question is, when you go into a hybrid model, what happens when you have 8 people in a room and another 8 are remote? Like, does everybody get an equal voice? It's harder to chime in when you see different people and you can read body language as people are about to start talking, right? You're playing an imbalanced game of hopscotch.
Yeah. Way to put that.
So I think that's going to be really hard. I look forward to that challenge. Uh, but what I imagine is knowing our team and what we've seen, and we have a lot of classic, like, okay, we're on the peninsula and we have a lot of people in the city, right? Like, honestly, I think most of them would be pretty down for, hey, I want to come in on Mondays and Fridays because that's when we do our big team events, right? We start the week together, we end the week together. Our TGFs are great for social activities and games, and our Mondays are fantastic for setting the plan for the week and celebrating wins. Um, and then like Tuesday to Thursday, they're like, yeah, I'll work from home. That totally works, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll have to figure out how do we still make sure we get the people who now we have people in Portland and Denver, soon to be two people in Denver and Austin.
Okay.
How do we actually keep them included in the same way?
To that point, have you accelerated your interest, or has it changed in your interest in hiring outside of the Bay Area?
It has, yeah, it's definitely opened up a lot more opportunity for us.
Okay. And I mean, is it purely resume based? How do you get a feel for someone when you're hiring virtually? I mean, how do you get a sense for that, or do you still want people? I mean, when we do get back to
Yeah,
hiring, when we can engage, are you going to want to fly them out and meet in person, or are you okay hiring virtually?
yeah, it's a good question. One of the things I really like about interviewing people virtually is it's a little bit easier because you're not having to cram them all into like, oh, you're having to drive somewhere or fly somewhere, so we're going to like jam you into this like 6 hour brutal block
Right.
where if you get knocked off your game in one interview, like all the other one, you're just rattled, and all the other ones are going to suck,
Yeah.
right? Like that blows. And so it's nice to give people a little bit of time to collect themselves too in between. You can weave it in. Um, I think it's really interesting to see how people show up too on video. Well, hopefully they show up on video. It's also really interesting to see folks like, where do they show up? Are they literally calling in from like their mobile device, like in Yosemite? No, just
In the
joking.
work.
Or like, do they have a work setup somewhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
or all of a sudden if they're like, hey, I'm going to work remotely and I'm literally calling like from my couch, like, oh gosh, like we're going to have to help you like set something else up if you're going to be doing this, right? And so I, I don't really mind that the working remote part as much,
Got it.
and interviewing people remote.
Got it. Okay. So, and we got like a minute, maybe two left. Let me ask you one kind of follow-on question. We want to make sure that if there are questions, again, feel free to throw them out there. But what's something through all of this that you've been thankful for, appreciative of, with your team or with the organization, how they've come together? I'm going to leave it open for you.
Um, yeah, honestly, um, I love our team. Like, we have this insanely great culture, and it's a pretty diverse culture, right? I mean, over half the company was born out of the United States. We have ages all the way from like just out of college to late 50s. People have kids, people don't have kids. And so you look at like the diversity of just like life situations, and it's fantastic. Like, you see people step in, you see people be like, literally, somebody's family, their best friends just test positive for COVID, and they're like, crap, I totally have to, like, I'm going to be AWOL for the next like 48 hours as we go figure out our test stuff, right? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden you see people popping up being like, what do you need? I have this covered for you. Like, do you have any deliverables you need me to take care of? And very similarly, we see people even encouraging each other to take vacation. Like, I actually
Yeah.
had to force some shutdown days just to think, like, prime the pump, be like, you don't even have to go anywhere. Just stop coming into your like home office and logging into the computer, right?
Love it.
But now we see people really encouraging each other to take vacations and really unplug, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well, man, we're at time. Any parting thoughts?
um, I'd say the next 6 months are going to be the most interesting as we really start to merge back in and hybridize a little bit. Um, but this is a good thing. Like, every once in a while, like the system, hopefully not just like, I don't want to make a macro commentary around like the world or the country, but like having some jolt to the system to kind of break it free of an existing trajectory, and swing the pendulum like from a working remote, working in the office. I think this is actually stress test in a number of ways and actually force people to invest so that working remote can be even more productive broadly, right? Obviously, a lot of people in this conference are bought into that idea already,
Sure.
but we're getting much broader awareness and adoption.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Sean. You are appreciated. You're fantastic. Look forward to talking to you soon, bud.
Dude, awesome. Thanks so much, Weston. Thanks
All right.
everybody for hanging out and listening to us.
Absolutely. Thank you all. All right.
Cool.
Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.